3, 2, 1, recording. Josh Henkeman, how you doing?
I'm Dan, how you doing? Sorry, I was putting my phone on Do Not Disturb. I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Brilliant. Thank you for putting it on. Let me do the same, actually, airplane mode. I'm doing well, thank you. And we, I think a lot of people saw that you made a Facebook post about 2 months ago, and this was about like, I'm sick and tired of gender-based violence. We all are, and I think no one knows what to do, and you've given us a little bit of direction. That's why I wanted to chat to you. So I think not a lot of people have heard from you. So probably your mates have heard from you since the post, but what would you like to say to, everyone else? Not a lot of people have heard from you since then.
Yeah, look, I think let me start from the beginning in terms of how it came about. Like, where there was a time, it was during lockdown, so I think it was actually more than 3 months ago now, probably about 3 months ago. Lockdown is blown by. I don't know, there was just a stage of my life where I just felt like I wasn't doing anything about gender-based violence, a subject that I feel quite passionate about. I just found myself in the same kind of echo chambers that I've been in before. I just felt that I felt really like I was just being another person showing my creation, not really making anything of it. So what ended up happening is one day it was just a random evening where I just wasn't sleeping and it was weighing heavy on my mind. And next morning, I recorded just a short video about how I'm feeling, and it wasn't really supposed to be anything. It was just the intention was to be some sort of video diary, I suppose. There wasn't any real thinking behind it. It was just a more of a reaction than anything else. What I ended up doing in that video, and I'm glad that I did it at the beginning of the video, because towards the end there was quite a bit of expletives and really foul language going on. But at the beginning of the video, I managed to kind of map out what I wanted in a weird way without really knowing what I was doing. So it ended up being a call to the men in my network to get together, because obviously during lockdown, Zoom was a massive thing. It still is now, but to get on a Zoom call and just hash it out and see where are our shortcomings, where are our failings, what are we doing to help the situation, what can we do to help the situation, why is there a problem, what is the problem. And I think so from there we started a men's network. You are part of it, and I know you don't want to blow your own horn here. You're an integral part of our group, and I think we realize that, look, there's a bunch of us that feel the same way, and a lot of us are really for various reasons, whether it be pride or whether it be just not wanting to be in the front line for fear of being cancelled, which is a running theme in our discussions. But we all realize that we're on the same place. We want to end this scourge, and I think we consider ourselves relatively good people. And I think for evil to triumph, good people need to sit and do nothing, right? So what happened is then we sat and we then took it upon ourselves to have these tough conversations and to understand that as men, we are the representations of what's wrong in the society for the most part. I know gender-based violence is a much bigger issue than men against women. There's obviously a lot of different spectrums within it, but for the most part, if you look at 80 to 90% of the cases, even more, it's men perpetrating against women. And we are physical and visual representations of trauma for a lot of women in this country. And I think for us, it's almost an unfair stigma we sometimes feel. And what's the best way to get away from that stigma is to try to figure out a way to get rid of the scourge of gender-based violence in itself.
Yeah. Well, thank you for explaining. And, when you say echo chamber, I appreciate that. Or I relate to that, because I feel like I get frustrated when we speak to people and we speak to each other, and everyone in that group on that call hates gender-based violence. They're sick of it, but no one's raping, abusing, murdering. So the echo chamber becomes a real problem for me, born out of frustration that I'm not doing anything material. But what I can say is that I've learned a lot from just chatting to people in that group, and so thank you for starting that. Um, and I mean, I'm the type of guy. So also, like, there's a friend of yours who's a psychologist, JP, and he taught me a few things as well. And I think it's very important for people with a diverse skill set to come together. And I mean, I'm in media, and so you're in social media, I'm in search, so we could actually make a difference as well with our skill sets. And I think that's what we're finding. You also introduced me to Langa for Men, and I'm supporting them now. We're actually making them some banners, not web banners, material banners for their because they have these, they talk to people in the townships. And that, I think, you know, people that are on the ground that are really fighting the fight, those are the soldiers in this war. SA is 5 times the global average for gender-based violence. So, you know, to think we're not in a war, we really are. And I think me and you feel the same way. We're disgusted by the fact that women can't walk around on the street and just feel safe. And then and a lot of men get upset. They get maybe we can call it male fragility, where, you know, not to invent any new terms here, but when women see a man, they kind of feel unsafe, and it's not necessarily my fault or your fault, but they can't help it. I think the number, it's something like 70% of women have had some form of gender-based violence perpetrated against them. So, yeah, I think we're both sick of it, and I know I can't change the whole world, but I do want to take small steps. And if through this podcast and through my work with Langa for Men, if I can help one less person be murdered, raped, or abused, I mean, I've done my job. So thank you for actually thank you for putting that video up. Yeah, go for it.
I think it's actually something important because we need to realize that this is our fight too. Regardless of the fact that we need to realize we also need to realize that this is we shouldn't be taking center stage in this fight. Sure. Because we are not the victims of this fight, right? We need to realize that we are the perpetrators, regardless of what our personal preferences, of what our personal actions are. I think we that's why our groups have been we've had such robust conversations, because as men we feel like we are fixers, and that's generally our position in life. And I think that's what we've been raised to believe. That's what we've been raised to be. And I think we need to sometimes step back from ourselves and understand that this issue is so big that if we start looking at it from one perspective as our own, as the fixers of this thing, we're not gonna get the nuance of the actual problem.
Right.
We're going to, if we need to look at this whole thing holistically from before, beginning, and after. So it'll be like more. So it's like a proactive, reactive, and then active in the middle, right? The active part is stuff that you're doing right now. So making banners to help existing organizations such as Langa for Men. You know, speaking like we are now, getting the message out there. One can see that as proactive as well. And then there also does need to be the element of reactive. We need to help change the stigma of men in this country. We need to be able to not have this situation where a woman walks up to us or walks away from us because we are a representation of their trauma.
Yeah,
it's really such a deep it's a deep theory for me, because trauma is, sometimes a lot of times people don't know that they have trauma. It's a visceral feeling sometimes when a woman can be okay with you in one moment, and you can say something, do something, even just twitch your eye in a certain way, and that could trigger off a chain of events that happened to her before. So I know I'm jumping around a lot, but I think what we need to remember is that this is not a new problem. This is something that's been around for decades, like centuries, for lifetimes. But I think the moment we're at at this time is that we are in a unique position where we've got so many different tools at our disposal. Social media being one of them, where we can use these types of platforms that you're using at the moment to get men that think along the same lines as we do to understand that this is not a personal attack on them personally. Like, this is not, I'm not saying, Daniel, you are a perpetrator, you need to change your shit. Like, it's not that. there is obviously an element of that where we do need to call out or terrible behavior. But I think in order to change ourselves, we need to understand that we are a problem and we are the problem. And we can then from there, then once we realize that there's a problem, like it's the same as addiction. You need to acknowledge that you are addicted, and then from there you can then fix yourself. That's a very controversial thing because a lot of men are like, no, Josh, you can't put us all in the same bracket.
Yeah.
But we are not all doing this. No, most of us are not. And I do understand that point of view. And I've softened my stance in the not all men thing. I'm sure you'd be glad to know me. I was very vocal about it. I'm not softened my stance in terms of why the message irks me. I think I've learned that not everybody thinks in the same types of ways that we are in our groups, for example.
Yeah.
A lot of people do feel as if these things are personal attacks, and I think I'm becoming more patient with these types of things, and I'm trying to explain my position rather than trying to cancel everybody that doesn't agree with me.
Yeah.
And I'm as guilty as the next person, I suppose.
Yeah, well,
But do you want to?
it's like saying, I mean, and look, I could get into trouble for this, but it's just part of the podcast. But it's like saying if I said every life matters, that's fine. But if I say all lives matter, that's a problem. So it's just you just have to be careful with. And I've said it many times on the podcast why I don't believe that, but um, it's just things get toxic and political very quickly. And I think when you say guys have pride or cancellation stops them from joining, that's a big problem for me. I don't believe in the dichotomy of oppressed and oppressor. So all men are oppressors and all women are oppressed. There's individual circumstances that dictates each situation, but we do need to get more men to join this army because we are in a war, and the way we get more men is not necessarily from shouting at them. So a lot of guys come to me and say, and so I'll meet you in the middle and say, yes, everything you're saying is true. So microaggressions do turn into macroaggressions. These are things that we need to. So yeah, we need to understand the root causes of this, and a lot of it is historical, traditional, cultural. I mean, and it's across all cultures, but it's deep rooted, and it's South Africa's history did not make it any easier. But to try get more men to join me in this fight, because I know a lot of people who have time, money, effort that they want to put in, but they just don't want to be shouted at. Or do you know what I mean? So we need to find a middle ground where we can recruit more soldiers, and that's really what I think my job is, and I'm going to try my best to do it.
When a lot of time is wasted on protecting egos
Right.
and trying to be nice, a lot of niceties. I feel like a lot of time is wasted on that, and that is my main issue with it, because I think when when somebody's accusing a whole gender of something, it's of course it's not every single person within that gender, right?
Yeah.
It's just and that's the way I see it, and that's why I'm saying I'm softening my stance on it, because I see it like that as simply as someone might not see it like that. So
Right.
when I feel it's exhausting, because the energy that I'm wasting now trying to explain to this one person that is going at me on Facebook is energy that could be better spent somewhere else.
Correct.
So I agree with you in that we need to try to get guys on board and not try to be militant about it. But I think at the same time, that's not necessarily something that I really have the patience for. I know I need to learn the different ways of handling things, but I think for me that one in particular, and I mean you've personally seen how antsy I get about that particular issue.
Yeah.
But look, I throughout this whole journey, I'm learning myself. I'm learning a
Yeah.
lot. I'm learning every single day from many different facets, especially things I don't necessarily agree with.
Sure.
I do enjoy listening to perspectives that are not my own, to get a holistic view of what the problems may be, or where I have a problem, where I might be falling short. So yeah, and also just to go back to your all lives matter versus every life matters versus whatever. That the the statement in itself is not problematic at all because it's true. Every life does matter. But when somebody tries to insert it into something that is a very focused issue, such as gender-based violence or Black Lives Matter, for example,
Yeah,
that's where it becomes problematic because then what you're doing is taking away from the issue that is being spoken about and then censoring yourself an issue that you have no business being involved in. And I think that's where that's where the thing comes in for me, where I feel like I'm not talking to you. You know what I mean? I'm not. You
sure.
know, I'm saying like, don't put yourself in a conversation because you feel like you're a little bit offended because somebody didn't mention you. I think that's the only issue I have with it. As I said before, the statement in itself, with out of that context, is not problematic at all. It makes complete sense because it's the truth.
Yeah,
Don't I think if you're going to say, I mean, you can use all types of analogies, and it'll sound so ridiculous when you use it in terms of, um, say, I want to buy a freaking onion. I'll go to the grocery store. I want to buy one onion. The grocer says, no, but all onions matter, right?
yeah,
How
no, and I'm
ridiculous
with
does
you.
it sound in that context?
Yeah, I'm with you on
Um,
that.
yeah.
The
So
reason,
that's yeah. Sorry,
sorry,
Karen.
you go ahead, go ahead.
No, so that's basically the point that I wanted to make. I think the things do make sense in various contexts,
Mm,
and if you're going to try to hijack an issue that means a lot to certain people,
yeah,
that's where I'm not going to accept it. I feel it's selfish and it's self-serving,
right.
and I think not if you're not looking at the bigger picture beyond yourself or your immediate surroundings, then I don't necessarily want to engage beyond a certain point.
Yeah. Well, no, thank you for clearing that up. And I mean, it's good, good point you got there. What I'm really trying to say is you have to be careful of your wording, otherwise things get toxic and political very quickly.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Sure.
Are you more into, so the thing about gender-based violence and what I really believe is that we need to make it cool to not abuse, whether it's physical or psychological. We need to make it cool to be an activist against gender-based violence. I think like at the moment, what you see in schools these days is kids think it's cool to be a gangster. And I mean, I'm probably guilty of it myself. I used to think gangsters were cool as well. I mean, playing Dr. Dre and Snoop, which I still play and I still love. But people don't think it's cool to be an activist, partially because most activists that you've seen over the last decade are just shouting at everyone, but partially because they just don't think it's their fight. So it comes back to where you say, don't say something that got nothing to do with you. The reason why I'm fighting gender-based violence is because I saw the signs. The signs say clearly, where are the men? Like, where are the real men? So so what I wanted to ask you is like, what kind of anti-gender based violence activist do you want to be? Are you, because there's a huge, like, I mean, you can go human trafficking, you can talk about female genital mutilation. It's so big. Like, there's so for me, I'm really against the murder, rape, and physical abuse of women in South Africa, and I want to start with the boys. Young boys need better direction. That's really you can't if you get too broad, you'll spread yourself too thin. So I think maybe just one of the questions I had for you for today was just try and describe really where you want to focus, and if you have thought about it yet.
I don't know if that is really a question that I've given too much thought about. I think with what probably I think the best way I can answer this is probably what sparked my this movement, I suppose. It's basically just what's going on in our country right now. When I feel I don't want to focus too much on, I don't want to focus too big, and I don't want to try to make things. I want to make things difficult for myself. And I think what started happening in our, especially in the chats that we've been having, we've we've identified a lot of different things that are very important, but at the same time, we've not been able to pinpoint something that we need to focus on immediately and then grow from there. So I think that's what I'm focusing on at the moment. I don't want to. Sorry, I'm quite congested, so you probably hear that I'm
Oh, good.
congested. But I think the thing that I don't think I want to get too much into what type of activist I want to be. I will leave that to people like yourself that have a bit more research on these things or whatever. But I think my first step is to attempt and to change the social norms amongst men especially. And I think my dream, whether it's a pipe dream or not, is to build a new generation of men with dignity, where they don't feel that they have to beat on a woman or rape a woman to feel like a man again. And then to also, and there was a point that I think somebody made in our groups a few weeks ago, where if you go into jails, to go into the jails at the moment, to the prisons, you'll find young men with no father figures. If they have father figures, they're also in prison.
But you see, they think it's cool. They think it's cool to be in jail, right?
So that comes to that speaks to my next point, where you want to build a generation of boys that don't feel that this is the way that they have to live, where they can feel that they can achieve what everybody else that are classes above them are achieving. Because just remember, this whole thing is such a nuanced thing because there's a whole lot of history, especially in this. Let's speak to this country only. There's a lot of history in this country where men, especially black men, have been trodden and treated less than. And not to excuse this behavior, but a lot of behavior is reactionary to circumstances that they find themselves in that are not necessarily their fault at all. In fact, they're not their fault at all. So you've got so many nuanced sections of society where, as a middle class kid myself, I can't speak to what somebody else is going through in the townships that have been trodden for years and years and years, that have smart people, Daniel, like super smart people that are now car guards, for example, or that are selling drugs or that are taking drugs, etc. So my dream is to have this generation of kids, this generation that are kids now, to become men that have every opportunity that was available to me, for example.
Yeah.
Because I understand how lucky I was to not have to go through that. My parents, not so lucky, right?
Yeah.
So to talk to your point, to your question, I think I for myself, I probably get too caught up in trying to figure out how my end goals would be. So instead, what I've started doing now is a network that I'm busy in the process of starting at the moment. We've had a couple of meetings so far. We are starting this network where we are getting individuals and businesses together to form some form of directory or some form of network where we all fight on our own in our own field. So we doing what we're doing. We don't necessarily have to step out of our lives and go to Josh's meeting, for example. Using what you have, using your facilities, using your knowledge, using your resources, and somehow within that we creating a common goal. So like a way forward that we all can relate to. And from that point, you will have, instead of having one person trying to do everything, you'll have 20 people doing heading towards one goal from all different types of areas. And I think that took us long to get to this point, but it's obviously come from conversations that I've been having with people, because I've been approached by many people, and that's where this network started. Just get everyone together in one place now and just try to figure out how we can do this. So I know, I mean, I don't want to get too much into detail about it, because I'll come on again in the future to discuss this, because I will need to promote it at some point.
You're welcome to come back on. Yeah, no, definitely. And so
this
it's more about
right now.
sorry,
Collaboration.
sorry, cutting you off a bit, but it's more about short-term and mid-term goals, and we'll worry about the long-term goals when we get there.
Right. So that's exactly it. So
Okay.
at this point, we need to work towards. Of course, we need to work towards the long-term goal, and they will obviously be in that in our strat sessions. But in terms of now, let's do something now, and it doesn't matter what it looks like from now. We don't know what is going to be in the future. Like the example that I used in our meeting, in our first meeting was, and this makes me so happy. The it's the Avengers Initiative, right? The It's such a simple concept where each of these superheroes have their own franchise. So you got Thor, that's whatever, and then you got Spider-Man, you got Iron Man, you got Captain America, you got Hulk, and they've all got their own like shows or movies or whatever they operate in their own section of this universe, and they do different things, right? So Hulk smashes, Spider-Man shoots webs and is strong, and Iron Man's what? Billionaire playboy philanthropist.
I can see
So
you
like
enjoying yourself
basically
too much there,
everybody,
John.
oh man, it's so much fun because I like to draw parallels to things that I enjoy, because it makes things easier for me to think about.
Yeah,
But
it
anyway,
makes sense. Yeah.
so what happens is that when the big threat comes to threaten the Earth, these guys get together, they pool their resources, and they're stronger together. And I think that's a perfect analogy for what I want to achieve with this, is that we all are doing things on our own. And we don't necessarily have to move away from that. We can use what we have and what we're doing to get to a final goal. And our Thanos is gender-based violence. We can fight that together. And nobody knew that Iron Man was going to kill him. So that's what I'm saying. At the end of the thing, we don't necessarily know what's gonna end this gender-based violence thing, but I believe that we can help to end it.
Or,
And
or
there's so
significantly
many.
decrease it.
That's it.
Also,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So there's so many different facets within even just our own group. We remember we have our resource page where everyone has
Skill
their
set.
skill set on a spreadsheet, and if you just take a look through that, there's such a vast variety of skills on that one page.
Yeah.
And then we can, as this thing grows, um, yeah, many different people can join and still be we're fighting, literally fighting from all angles.
Yeah. And I mean, you've started a really good platform. What started out as just a video of a bit of anger has actually turned into a really good initiative. And of course, we'll have you back on when we have some progress and you know what you're doing, and you sort of, even if you don't ever specialize in a very specific thing, like going to a kid's school and talking to boys and girls, you've already done quite a bit by just putting that initiative together and getting that group of guys together. And I see there's some girls as well now, well, women, but what I would just on that note, I sometimes do make a bit of a provocative gesture, but not to provoke people, just to provoke thought. You mentioned that there are sort of how do you say, societal and social and behavioral norms that you'd like to change. You said especially in males. Would you ever try and talk about social and behavioral norms in females, or you don't want to go there yet?
I don't know if it's my place at this point in time, to be
Okay.
honest with you. Um, I think especially for this fight, when we had a lot of, sorry, for our chats, we had a lot of discussions about how to bring women into the conversation and so on.
Okay.
And I think it's important for us to realize that we are not the martyrs in this situation. We are not the ones that are supposed to be changing everything, just because we're fixing, right?
Yeah.
And this is where like a little bit of arrogance comes in, a little bit of male arrogance, because we were
Yeah.
like, well, we can bring them into our space, and so on. Like, it's not our place.
Right.
If women want to come into our space, then they are free to do so, and then they can come into our space, or they can invite us into their space. The power doesn't lie with us. It shouldn't lie with us. That's the
Correct.
problem. That's actually the problem,
And
because we are
also,
taking
I,
too much
I,
power.
yeah, I think you're 100% spot on there. And what happens when males can't fix something, they try and fix it with force, or they break it.
Right.
So this is this
Right.
is this is the root
Yeah.
of the problem, really.
Yeah.
And I just think so. I mean, if I've had Melissa on the podcast before, and I asked her, do women have a part to play? She said, absolutely, resoundingly yes. So I think to get to the root cause of this is to actually figure out the societal, behavioral, and social norms that have become normal that shouldn't be, but it's men and women. So I'll focus on men for now, but we do need to have these very difficult conversations. Yeah, hopefully one day we get to a place where things are less political and toxic, and we can just talk about what's real and figure out the truth, and then hopefully decrease the problem. That's really why I started the podcast in the first place.
Because I agree with Melissa. Of course, we would have a role to play in this, but it's not our place to tell them what their role is.
100%.
I think that's the crux of it for me. I think we need to just work on ourselves and our immediate surroundings, and then from there, everyone else will work on the immediate surroundings. And surroundings obviously is this. That's how things grow.
Yeah.
But in terms of women, it's not my place. It's just
well, I think
literally not my place to tell them what to do.
Yeah. No, I think you're doing your part by just making a platform where people can speak, and I think the more people discuss the topic at hand, the less fragility there is involved. And I mean, I'm coming from a like a sort of, you could call me I'm a privileged white male. I'm a heterosexual white male, so I have fragility in all sorts of places, but I have less fragility than others, which makes me more approachable and easier to talk to, some would say. But I think what you've done is great, and so I think I've asked you everything I wanted to say, or everything I wanted to ask today, and I just think I just want to thank you again for putting that video out there the one day. It must have taken a bit of courage just to say, you know what, I'm sick of this. I'm putting this out there, and you'll find a lot of people agree with you. A lot of people are sick of it, and a lot of people are willing to put time, money, and effort behind this because they realize they don't want to live in a society where women don't feel safe. So, thank you. And would any last thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I just want to touch on what you said now, because you're right. I got a lot of negative response from that. At the same time, we also need to understand that not all of us are in the same place in our lives in terms of being able to put our time and effort into this fight. And I found that a lot with our group, where the numbers dwindled. At one point, it was just me and you on the call, and like towards the end, which is why we had to space it out a bit more. I think we need to understand that a lot of guys do want to change, but not necessarily have the capacity or the time or the energy, or even just the mental capacity to be able to do what we're doing, and to actually, So I think it's important for us to keep going, and I'm glad that you're still with me on this. A lot of guys are still with me on this as well. I think we are stronger together, but at the same time, if we push, we will get results. I think it's a thing of being willing to do it, and having the resources, to the time, and also just like the pure will to see change.
Yeah.
So as you're thanking me, I thank you, Daniel. thank you for your platform, and thank you for what you're doing on your platform. Even though you called me out in the Naga for many episodes. So good.
So I think it comes down to a sense of urgency, and a lot of people feel like it's not urgent right now. But if they felt the same sense of urgency that I do and you do, they would quickly find time, effort, and money to help. I mean, money's not a big thing. If you don't have the money, that's actually fine. Then we just, if every man in South Africa put time and effort into this problem, there wouldn't be any murders or rapes. It's just a fact. And then just to clear my own name quickly, just on the Langa for Men podcast, I said I was tired of we talking the thing we spoke about earlier, the echo chamber, and I really feel like we've you know what, there's some stuff we can talk about on the next podcast, but we'll leave it for that podcast because we want to, like you said, we want to get some progress, and then you'll come back on, and so thank you for chatting me today. And I think it's such an important topic. The more people that watch this, the better. The more men that get involved, the less murders, rapes, and abuse there'll be. So thank you, Josh. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time today.
Appreciate it.
Cheers, bud.